Great question. So Mallory asked about seed oils and mentioned how they're everywhere and how many people don't realize how bad they are for us. Or are they as bad for us as it sounds, or whatever information she was getting. So what I'll say first is we want to understand essential fatty acids. And essential fatty acids are shortened to EFAs. And the essential fatty acids are made up of omega-6 fatty acids and omega-3 fatty acids. All right, and actually, let's do it this way. Essential fatty acids are made up of omega-6s, which we'll use red to represent fire, and omega-3s we'll use blue to represent water. Okay, fire for inflammation, water for anti-inflammatory. And so the first thing to recognize is that they're essential. And the word essential means we cannot make them in our own physiology or biologically, so we must consume them to get them. Okay, so that the mere fact that they're essential and that we can't make them ourselves means that they're not inherently good or bad. They're both essential, right? So then whether or not they're good or bad depends on the balance or the ratio of the two. So if we go, if we have omega-6s on this side of the seesaw and we have omega-3s on this side of the seesaw, what really is going to determine whether the ratio is, quote, good or bad is, are these unbalanced or not? Are they balanced? So unfortunately, with seed oils, the standard American diet is full of seed oils. And most of the time, the seed oils are going to be reds. They're going to be omega-6s. All right. And those are things like sunflower oil and safflower oil and canola oil, which isn't really even that's a pretty much man-made thing. There's rapeseed oil. There's all kinds of them, and most of them are going to be, peanut oil would fall under here. These are all going to be omega-6s. And if you look at most processed foods and you look at any restaurant, they're cooking with these seed oils, and these seed oils are omega-6s. And omega-6s, as you can see from the red color, like we said before, are inflammatory as opposed to anti-inflammatory omega-3s. Okay, so again, they're both essential. We need them both to be healthy. We can't be completely healthy without having them. So they're not inherently bad or good, but when these seed oils or the omega-6s become bad is when the ratio of the two is way too dominant with omega-6s. All right, and there's research, they've been looking at this for years, and the average human, the last number I saw, which was a little while ago, so it's probably higher now, the average human is, or the average American, is 40-1 omega-6s to omega-3s, which is way too high. Okay, the hunter-gatherer research looking at hunter-gatherer tribes that follow an ancestral type diet or a Paleolithic type diet, they're between 1-1 and 4-1 for healthy. So the average American is 10 times too high in the omega-6s, and high omega-6s promote increased risk of cardiovascular disease, of cancer risk, of pain, so chronic pain and arthritis and things like that, and autoimmunity. Okay, so it's all about the ratio. And like we said, the SAD diet, the standard American diet, is loaded with these things. Whereas if we look at that Paleolithic or ancestral type diet, their diets were high in grass-fed or wild meats. Okay, so that GF is grass-fed, not gluten-free, but they happen to be gluten-free as well. Wild-caught fish. Those are the two best sources of omega-3s in our diet. You can get a little bit from flax, and you can get a little bit from chia, but those are relatively heavy in conversion energy as humans to get the omega-3s out of them. So I would say that you're not going to be able to take just flax and chia and not eat meats to get your omega-3s. Okay, so the average American diet is pretty much deficient in these four things, and like we said, dominant here, which promotes that dominant omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and results in what we see in America: very unhealthy, very obese, very inflamed. Heart disease is the #1 killer, followed by cancer. Many people have pain, and autoimmunity is a leading cause of morbidity, which is disability, pain, decreased quality of life. So if we want to improve our health outcomes, we have to improve our nutrition. And if we want to improve our nutrition, we have to move from a processed food, industry driven food pyramid, my plate type of eating to a return to our ancestral wild type of eating. And that promotes a more natural 1:1 to 4:1 essential fatty acid ratio. Any other questions in addition to that, Mallory, or anyone else?
So should they be avoided as much as possible, or like just don't eat them at all?
Oh, great question. No, so remember, they're essential. So we must have them to be healthy, right? So you don't want to have no intake of omega-6s because we need those for normal physiology. What we need to do is lower this ratio, right? So if you're someone who's been eating a standard American diet and your ratio's off here, then we need to address that. So that would be reducing our omega, trying to get my red here. We'd want to reduce this, right? So cut down on our intake in sixes. And oftentimes, again, because the standard American diet is deficient in this, oftentimes we also have to increase these. So increase the threes, reduce the sixes. You can test your own levels through blood work, and with specific testing of an individual, we can say more specifically, how does your imbalanced seesaw need to be addressed if it is in fact imbalanced? Because it's possible that you don't have too high of an omega-6 level. It might just be that you have too low of an omega-3 level, right? So that would look more like this. If we drew a new seesaw, it'd be like, hey, you have good levels of sixes, but too low levels of threes, right? So in that case, if we make it visual here, in this case, and let me go back. So here's our pivot point there. So this is level, the omega-6s are level, those don't need to be raised. In this person's case, they need threes. They're deficient in threes, they're not eating too many sixes, right? In this person's case, they had too many sixes, say, but they have sufficient threes, then they just need to lower their sixes. And then a lot of people have way too many sixes and not enough threes, so you have to do both. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so do you only get the 6 from the oils, or is there other foods too that have it in it?
No, you get it. Yeah, your meats have it. Your corn and soy, nuts. Most nuts are 6 dominant. Some, like walnuts, have a little bit of threes in them. Some have a little bit of threes, but they're mostly sources of omega-6s. So yes, there's other dietary sources. The seed oils are what take us over the top, right? Because if you're eating the restaurant processed fried foods, the seed oil that's not natural. So if all you were doing was eating some sunflower seeds right? If you think about ancestrally, our ancestors weren't going and getting chicken wings, that were fried in sunflower oil or peanut oil, or they weren't going to Five Guys and getting the fries fried in the peanut oil, right? They might have come across a couple peanuts or maybe some sunflower seeds, but that wouldn't be a level to totally, blow up their omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Whereas in, current humanity, everything's cooked in some kind of oil. So we're being exposed to far more than our physiology is used to, which drives this ratio dysfunctional. So yeah, it's seed oil consumption, it's nuts. So, a lot of people move to a paleo diet and eat a ton of nuts, and that's not helping if they're omega-6 dominant already, because those seeds are all, or those nuts are all omega-6 dominant, and seeds are omega-6 dominant. So it's not that you totally want to avoid it. It'd be moving away from these pro-inflammatory oils. So what could we use instead? You could use avocado oil or coconut oil. You don't want to cook with olive oil at high heat. Olive oil is more of a condiment type oil, so that's a medium heat, but really it's better as a condiment on salad with balsamic vinegar, chili flakes, or something like that. The high heat cooking oils would be coconut oil and avocado oil.
Okay, thank you for going over that. That makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, you're welcome. Do you have another corollary question with that?
Well, I do.
Nope. Okay, what is it?
What about linoleic acid? Like, does that matter?
Yeah.
The linoleic acid that's in the oil.
Yeah, so the linoleic acid is part of the omega-6 tree. So it's up there as a parent acid, like arachidonic acid, which will go down the omega-6 pathway. But another thing to know, I didn't get into it here, is there is an anti-inflammatory omega-6, and that is called GLA. So GLA is actually an omega-6 that is anti-inflammatory. So again, we don't necessarily want no omega-6s, because as you go down the omega-6 pathway, you may produce GLA, and that's found in I want to say boric, but that's wrong. It's starts with a B.
Borage.
Yeah, thank you. Borage oil. Thank you, Sue.
Yep.
It's in borage oil, and I believe in some primrose oil as well, in a little bit. So
Yep.
that's an anti-inflammatory omega-6. So again, it's not, our society loves to demonize things as, bad oil and bad cholesterol and bad this and that. There's not good and bad. There's appropriate and essential, and it's the relationship of the 6s to 3s, or the LDL to the HDL in the individual, that determines, is there an imbalance in the ratio that is bad long term for your physiology if you don't correct it. So, Lyndall, did I answer your question? I don't even remember. Okay.
So I have a question about omega-3s.
Sure.
How do you choose? I know there's different ratios of the DHA, EPA in different supplements. How do you choose which ratio? I mean, do they have different, DHA good for one thing and,
Yeah.
et cetera?
Yep, thank you. So omega-3, so we have this term omega-3s, and omega-3s is the umbrella term. That's like the last name or the family name. That's like the Bartemuses, right? But then there's individuals. There's John Bartemus, and there's Kate Bartemus, and there's these different Bartemuses. There's different individuals inside. So the individuals in the omega-3s are eicosapentaenoic acid, or EPA. So if you turn your fish oil supplement over, you'll see these different names. There's docosahexaenoic acid, which is DHA. And some supplements, if you have a newer one or a company that's staying up on the research, there's one called DPA, which I believe is docosapentaenoic acid. And so when you talk about fish oils, like Sue asked, are there different functions? Yes. The EPA is the major or most anti-inflammatory of the three. So this is like your natural ibuprofen would be a way to think about it. Okay, this is the best natural anti-inflammatory of the omega-3s. The DHA is the more cognitive based one. So your brain has a lot of DHA. All right, so when you're pregnant and or breastfeeding and they tell you to get your fish oils, it's because they want you to have good DHA levels, because the breast milk, the DHA in the breast milk goes to the baby's brain and helps it develop properly. And the less of that you have, if many Americans are deficient in this, many mothers are deficient in this, and hopefully they breastfeed. And if they breastfeed and they're deficient, baby's still going to steal whatever amount deficient mom has. And so taking that from mom promotes an increased risk of postpartum depression. So you want to make sure that you're heading into pregnancy, birth, and breastfeeding with optimal omega-3 levels. And then DPA is essentially the reserve tank for EPA. So this is, if you're using your EPA, if you're really inflamed, say, and you're smoking through your EPA stores, then DPA can replenish, recharge that EPA fire extinguisher for you. And if you stay inflamed so that you use up all your reserves, now you're really inflamed and in trouble there. So yes, so that was the first question, is what are they? Do they have different functions? There's that piece. And then ratios. So many supplements are 2 to 1. Whoop. So that 2 looks like a 3. 2 to 1 EPA to DHA. There's some literature that suggests that in nature, the ratio is more like 3 to 2. So, you can do your best in terms of most supplement companies are more on the scale of a 2 to 1 ratio. There's some out there that are 3 to 2. So you just do your best, get at least a 2 to 1. But then if you want to be super specific to yourself, like I said, you can test your omega-6 to omega-3 ratios and levels in the blood and know specifically, hey, what's my omega-6 to omega-3 ratio down here? But then you can also know specifically, well, what's my EPA level and what's my DHA and what's my DPA? And if your EPA is fine, but your DHA is low, then maybe you get an omega-3 supplement that's only DHA or DHA dominant, because you specifically need the DHA and not the EPA as much. And then one piece we haven't talked about yet is we have a third non-essential, we'll call it orange, a third non-essential omega. Oh, that's ugly. Hold on. Let's use green. A non-essential omega fatty acid is omega-9. And our body can construct omega-9s, but not omega-6s or 3s. And omega-9 is what you're finding in olive oil and things like that. So to Sue's point, if you're taking an omega-3 supplement, usually it's an omega-3 that's mostly EPA and DHA, until recently companies are coming out with DPA as well, as the science is showing that's necessary. But if once you get your levels robust, you don't necessarily want to take a high dose omega-3 forever. So you can move to a product that has a balance of these 3 in it. So you'll get your 6s, your 3s, and your 9s all in one product to promote, healthy ratios that the body wants to have. So Valentine's tomorrow. Okay. And so heart health, in the way healthcare offices are trying to stay relevant this week is to talk about the heart because of Valentine's Day. And so how do the essential fatty acids play into heart health? Well, we said down here, cardiovascular disease risk is a big one if you have an imbalanced ratio. So omega-6s, yes, they're pro-inflammatory. They also are pro-clotting and pro pro-cardiovascular disease. So promoting clotting or blood thickening is one way that they do that. Whereas omega-3s are the opposite. They promote heart health and they are blood thinning. Okay, so they're anticoagulant. So when you think about, you know, should I take aspirin every day, or I have, you know, clot history or clot history in my family, well, perhaps before you jump on an aspirin or jump on a Coumadin or something like that, maybe you could thin your blood to a healthy level just by getting sufficient in your omega-3s, essential fatty acid ratio.
I have a question really quick about the omega-6s and omega-3s and the 9s. Can you get that in like tallow and butter and ghee or whatever, you know, like animal fat, or is it only through
Yeah,
the seed oil?
thank you. I meant to, you're awesome. I meant to address this as I was going and went down a different rabbit hole. So again, Lyndall asked, can you get omega-3s from tallow, which is rendered beef fat, or ghee, which is clarified butter or butter? So dairy products. So grass-fed meats, remember, are where we're getting omega-3s, a significant source of our omega-3s. So if you're eating a grass-fed cow, that cow was born to eat grass. All right. So if that cow eats grass and free ranges, that cow is going to have an omega-3 an omega-3 dominant fatty acid ratio in its meat and in all of it, right? So if we butcher that cow and we eat it, it's going to be grass-fed beef, so we'll have omega-3s there. If we render its suet, you know, kidney fat down to tallow, it should have an omega-3 bias to it. If we're using it, if we keep it alive and we take milk from it, it should have an omega-3, you know, an omega-3 biased milk, or a, you know, the natural ratios in it that are healthy. If you take a cow and you grow it in Kansas on a feedlot where it's never eaten grass, it's eating things that it shouldn't eat, like corn and soy and alfalfa, well, those things will inflame that cow, and that cow will become obese, and they'll get more pounds per cow that they can butcher and sell, but that cow will be obese, that cow will have heart disease and maybe cancer. And so if you eat that cow, that's an omega-6 dominant cow. So that's a pro-inflammatory beef, a pro-inflammatory milk, pro-inflammatory tallow. So, you know, you are what you eat, but you are what you eat eats too, right? So if you're eating a healthy cow that came from nature, you're going to get the benefits of, you know, what nature intended. If you eat a cow that was raised on a man-made food lot, then you're, over time, that leads to bad things.